Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with this topic of the 5 precepts. This is referred to as a householder's guide to daily practice because oftentimes as household practitioners who are learning from the household life, that this is one of the first teachings you pay a lot of attention to because it's going to help you to understand wise decision making around 5 impactful decisions. If you've ever heard that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, he actually didn't teach that. That sounds like black and white rules and commandments. I'm going to share with you his original words on these topics and help you to see that it's not so black and white, and you need to be able to really navigate this. By moving to this higher consciousness, you'll be able to take in the variables of any given situation and figure out what is it that I should do here in order to produce wholesome results. So the 5 precepts are going to help you to significantly reduce any kind of unwholesome results that you're experiencing in life because it's helping you to understand the natural law of Kamma. Sometimes when people study things like the 5 precepts, they think it's rules or commandments or things like this, and that's not what the Buddha is teaching you. He's showing you the natural law of Kamma so that you can cultivate the wisdom about that, and then you can navigate the world, right? He was already peaceful. He was already joyful. He wasn't trying to convince anybody of anything. He's just saying, hey, you would like to know how I did it? Here's how I did it, right? So understanding this natural law is so important. So the 5 precepts are actually helping you to target your craving, anger, and ignorance. Since we just talked about that, these 5 precepts, they're not rules or commandments. And if you were just following rules and commandments, you would never get to enlightenment. It's helping you to actually reduce your craving, anger, and ignorance. And I help you to be able to see that as we go. And just like always, you guys are welcome to ask questions. Okay. So the 5 precepts are to significantly reduce your unwholesome kamma, but it's the Eightfold Path that's going to completely eliminate all your unwholesome kamma. The 5 precepts plug into the Eightfold Path. It's a teaching that really helps you to expand upon what you're understanding from the Eightfold Path. So this is important to understand in order to plug it into the Eightfold Path because it's going to help you to understand more details around right speech and right action. Okay, so this first one is the Buddha saying, abandoning the taking of life, refraining from taking life, without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. Okay, so whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, it's important not to believe, right? You're always interested in investigating and examining. And when you see a teaching like this, if you don't know what the word compassionate means, you need to look that up and be able to understand it. What it means is concern for the misfortune of others. If you don't know what a living being is, you need to be able to see that and figure that out. The Buddha actually gives a definition on what a living being is because you shouldn't ever assume that what you already know is true. Right? Because you're trying to awaken to this wisdom that the Buddha had. So rather than, maybe you will consult a dictionary, but oftentimes what you're going to see is a dictionary is different than what the Buddha is describing because he's giving you the pure natural laws. So when you see what the Buddha describes as what a living being is, he explains something called the 5 aggregates, or we might call this the 5 criteria or the 5 elements that determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. So I'm going to introduce you guys to the 5 aggregates because this is going to help you to determine what is a living being. Because whenever you're causing harm to a living being, this harm is going to come back to you. So you need to know what is a living being. So a living being has 5 criteria or 5 aggregates. A living being is going to have physical form. They're going to have feelings, perceptions, something called volitional formations, and a consciousness. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through this, helping you understand this. Now remember, you're not even interested in believing this. Don't believe in the 5 aggregates. You know you're a living being. You can reflect on this as I'm teaching it to you and help you to be able to see that this is true. So a living being is going to have physical form. Right? There's going to be physical form. That's what we have in this body. This is physical form. A living being is going to have feelings, right? This is like the pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. Then there's going to be perceptions. This is your views and opinions about the world, the way you look out at the world. Your volitional formations is the 4th one. What that is choices and decisions. A living being is going to make choices and decisions. They're going to have free will. Then there's the 5th one, which is the consciousness or the mind. So a living being is going to have physical form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations or choices and decisions, and there's going to be a consciousness or a mind. So we can see that human beings have all 5 of these things. And we can even see squirrels, rabbits, birds, lizards, snakes. They have all 5 of these things. So that can help you to independently verify that this is true, because this definition is held up for 2,500 years. But then, because you're interested in really exploring this and examining it, you don't just stop there with your independent verification. You take something that you know is not a living being, like say this chair that I'm sitting in, and you ask yourself, does this have physical form? Yeah, it has physical form. Does it have feelings? No. Does it have perceptions, choice, or does it have opinions and views about the world? No, it doesn't have those. Does it have volitional formations, which are choices and decisions? Can it choose to pick itself up, walk down the street, and put itself back down? No, it doesn't have those. And does it have a consciousness or a mind? No, it doesn't have that, right? So we can see something that we know is not a living being, that this definition also holds up in that situation too. So this is the way you explore and examine and investigate his teachings, that you don't believe them. So you're going to need to know the 5 aggregates, because that's what's going to help you to determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. But between now and then, as you're learning about that, you might decide to use this definition. This isn't the natural law, but this is helping you to lean in this direction, that a living being is typically going to come from an egg, a sperm, and it's going to have a consciousness. Every single living being will have a consciousness, right? Not every living being, though, comes from an egg and a sperm. This will work in about 99.9% of the situations, but there's some rare situations where there's a living being that doesn't come from an egg and a sperm. So if you'd like to use this type of thing, you can for a period of time, but ultimately you'd like to get to the point where you understand the 5 aggregates and you're looking at whether a being is a living being or not through the 5 aggregates. So when you understand the 5 aggregates, you can come to understand that a virus or bacteria is not a living being, because it doesn't have all 5 aggregates. And things like plants are not living beings either. Now, the challenge is that in the unenlightened state, we use language that makes it appear that these things are alive. Because we will say, I'm going to take this antibiotic and kill this bacteria in my body, right? Well, you're not really killing that bacteria because it's not a living being. What you're actually doing is you're eliminating it out of the body. Or someone might say, don't kill that tree, right? Or I'm going to go kill this tree, or I'm going to kill these weeds, right? You're not killing the weeds because the weeds aren't a living being, right? They don't have all 5 aggregates. So in the unenlightened state, with the lack of wisdom of something like the 5 aggregates, we might actually say these things. And then that propagates within our mind the perception that these things are living beings, when in reality, they're actually not. So by you understanding this, then you'll know in what situations would be wise or unwise to do any particular thing. You know, we do those temple cleanup days once every 3 months. And one time I went outside with some students and we were taking care of some weeds and stuff. And they were like, oh my goodness, we shouldn't be doing this because aren't we killing? And I was like, no, we're not killing. This isn't a living being. We can remove these weeds and we're not causing any harm, right? Not only can you see it through the 5 aggregates, but you can see it through the natural law of Kamma too. Because the natural law of Kamma is anytime you're putting out harm, harm will come back to you. If you're causing harm to a living being, this harm is going to come back to you. So not only can you see that this bacteria and virus is not a living being because it doesn't meet the 5 aggregates, you can see it through the natural law of Kamma. That if this virus or this bacteria was a living being and you killed it, you would be experiencing unwholesome results or unwholesome Kamma. But when you remove a bacteria from the body, or when you remove a virus from the body, you don't experience unwholesome results. You experience wholesome results because this body becomes more healthy. That is a wholesome result. So that's how you can see that a virus or bacteria is not a living being, because when you eliminate it, you're experiencing wholesome results. And you can see the same thing with a plant, that if I was to harvest a cauliflower, I'm experiencing wholesome results because I haven't killed anything whatsoever. So we use language that doesn't really represent true reality because the mind lacks wisdom. So when you come to understand this, then you see what the Buddha is teaching you to do is have this concern for the misfortune of others. He's not teaching you to preserve all life at all costs. That's not what he's teaching you. That's sometimes how people read these things. But you can't read between the lines and interpret it in your own way. You need to be able to see true reality of what's actually truly he's teaching you. He's teaching you to cultivate this compassion in your mind towards all living beings, and where possible, to refrain from killing. Because whenever you kill, there's a certain amount of craving in the mind. There's a longing, a yearning. There's anger or bitterness or hostility. And this is coming from the ignorance. But when you restrain your mind and you choose not to kill that human being, or you choose not to kill that animal, now you're reducing your craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind. That's what this precept is doing for you, is helping you to make wise decisions so that you don't make decisions based in craving, anger, and ignorance. So when you start to learn this, then you might need to look at things like these here to determine whether or not you would actually do these things or not. Things like euthanasia of a human or animal, termination of a pregnancy, suicide, assisted suicide, capital punishment, war, government-sponsored killing, and murder. These are all intentional killings, but whether or not you choose to do them or not is going to be your choice. It's a case-by-case basis. It's not black and white here. I'm going to go through a few of these and show you in situations where it could be a wise decision to potentially do these things, and in other situations it could be unwise, right? So the Buddhist teachings aren't plug and play. It's not like always do it this way. It's not a decision tree where do it this way, always do it this way. That would be permanence. You need to be able to take in the variables and see in what situation would be wise to do any particular thing. Moving to a higher consciousness isn't that you're following a decision tree that somebody else made up, right? Moving to a higher consciousness is that you have wisdom, and now you're making decisions based in that wisdom that's going to produce wholesome results for you. So let's take this one of termination of a pregnancy. This is one that a lot of times people think of it as a political discussion. I don't think of it that way, because it's not a political thing. It's a human thing, right? And we have this technology, and in some situations it's actually beneficial and it can be used in a helpful way. In other situations it could be harmful, right? And whether someone chooses to terminate a pregnancy or not is a choice for them to make. Right? I'm not here to tell people what they should or shouldn't do with their own bodies. That's up to each individual person to decide. What I'm here to do is help people to be able to see the natural law of Kamma. And whatever they decide, I'm here to help them. In fact, if somebody came to me and asked me whether they should or shouldn't terminate a pregnancy, I wouldn't tell them, because it's not my choice to make. I would say, if you terminate your pregnancy, here's what you'll experience. And if you don't terminate it, here's what you'll experience. And then it's up to you to decide. Based on the natural law of Kamma, you're going to experience whatever results that you experience. So what I'm going to share with you is helping you to see this natural law of Kamma. But at the end of the day, it's each individual's own choice to decide for themselves what they would like to do or not do. So let's take two scenarios. Let's just say there's a female. Let's just say I'm a female, which obviously I'm not. Let's just say I had a womb and there was a fetus inside the womb. And with medical technology, the doctor informs me that there's no way that this fetus is going to live a viable life outside the womb. And as long as I leave this fetus continuing to grow inside the womb, it's threatening my life and I could die at any time, right? Well, in this situation, I might come to the conclusion of eliminating this and removing it from the body. And this would be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because the first being you need to be compassionate towards is yourself. If you can't have loving kindness and compassion for yourself, how can you practice it for other beings? So the Buddha is not teaching you to preserve all life at all costs. He's teaching you to be concerned for the misfortune of others, including yourself too. So this being that's growing inside the womb, if it's never going to live a viable life outside the womb and it's threatening my life, a wise decision could be potentially to remove it out of the body. And this would be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So in this situation, termination of a pregnancy could actually be beneficial. But now let's just say that I was out having sex with lots and lots of people, regularly getting pregnant, maybe 5, 6, 8, 10 times. I'm having to terminate pregnancies through this procedure. Now, having done that so many times, it's going to cause difficulties to this body, right? Because each time I go through that medical procedure, it's causing harm to this body, because now I'm making this choice to continue to terminate this pregnancy just based in me being out there having sex and not choosing to use any kind of contraception or something like this. So now 5, 6, 8, 10 times of terminating a pregnancy, I'm going to start noticing that this body is going to be affected in an unwholesome way. I'm going to experience unwholesome kamma from this. Where this first example, it's maybe a once in a lifetime kind of thing, maybe twice in a lifetime. And now you're not going to experience unwholesome results there. You're going to experience wholesome results because the body can now be healthy and you're not going to lose your life in that situation. Right? So this is just one example. And again, what someone chooses to do, it's up to them. But you can see the difference here in terms of a choice that someone would make. It's not that you always do it one way or never do it another way. You need to look at each situation and decide for yourself what would be wise. Let's take another one. Let's take like war. So a government could say to us, go over there and kill those people in that land. If you go over there and kill those people, we're not going to prosecute you for murder. But if you come over here on our land and you kill somebody, we're going to prosecute you for murder and we're going to put you in jail. Right? So this is a human law, and human laws are imperfect. So a government can't negate the natural law of Kamma. If you go off to war, you're going to experience the results of those decisions. That if you're out there killing, the results of those decisions are you're very likely to get killed yourself, or at the very least, you can get injured, right? You can get amputation, you can get brain injuries, you can get any number of things. You can get exposed to certain chemicals that affect you for the rest of your life. You can get addicted to substances like drugs and alcohol. When you come back home, you could have difficulties reintegrating into society, securing housing and employment and things like this. Sometimes people come back home from war and they commit suicide, they kill themselves. Right? This is the results of our decisions, having gone off to war, right? So the government can't negate the natural law of Kamma, that we're still going to experience the results of our decisions. Let's take another example that's not even up here. Let's just say that my house was infested with termites, right? Well, in this situation, we need to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So what do we do here? Well, if you're living compassionately, you're probably going to do some research to figure out, how can I eradicate these termites without killing them? And you might, now that we're in the information age, start doing some research and figure out, is this possible? And what you might come back with is no, it's not possible, that you're going to need to kill these beings in order to get them out of your home. Where if you allowed them to keep eating your home, this wouldn't be living compassionately, because you need to live compassionately for yourself, right? That's the concern for your own misfortune. And now these insects that are causing harm is going to end up coming to them because of the harm that they're causing. And it's unfortunate that an animal doesn't have the same level of consciousness as a human being, because human beings, if we ate wood, we would just go to the forest and we would just eat wood because we know that it's not causing harm to anybody. But these animals don't understand that, right? Because they don't have a high enough consciousness. So they're actually eating the wood of this house. And now because they're causing harm is going to come to them, right? And you can do these kinds of things without any guilt or without any shame, and realize that this is the decision that you need to make in order to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. That you didn't just willy-nilly just kill them. You did some research. You kind of looked to see, is there some other options? And you're trying to do this without harming them. But what you've come back with is there's no way to do that. So now there needs to be this harm, right? So you're going to be confronted with these kinds of situations as you go forward in life, and you're going to need to process that through this precept. Sometimes students ask me about these types of things. This is a do not resuscitate. This is a DNR. Some countries have this, where when you're alive, you can sign a legal document that tells your family that if this body dies, don't bring me back to life. This is like, don't use medical technology to bring me back to life. And sometimes students ask me, they say, am I practicing this precept? And the answer is yeah, because you haven't killed anybody in that situation. You're just saying, I'm comfortable with death. You don't need to bring me back to life. right? Then sometimes people ask me about defense or protection. Like, what do you do if at 3 a.m. in the morning someone's breaking into your home? Maybe they're coming in through the window. And what I share with people is this person is not bringing you chocolate and flowers. They're there to do harm, right? And if you know that, then what I would suggest people do, if possible, is get out, right? If they would like to steal something or break something, what have you, so be it. Get out of the house, call the police. They have the equipment and the training to be able to deal with this kind of thing. But remember, it's not plug and play, because that's not going to be the wisest decision in every single situation, right? Because maybe you look outside and there's a gang of people outside your house. You can't get out. Or maybe there's a massive fire that's engulfing the entire neighborhood and you can't get outside the house. So you need to be able to move to this higher consciousness and figure out what would be the wisest decision here. Well, if you're backed up in the corner and this person is coming at you with a knife, it wouldn't be living compassionately to just stand there and let them stab you, right? So if you need to defend this body by causing harm to this person, that harm that person is causing, their decision to cause harm, now they're experiencing harm that's coming to them. And what I would encourage you to do is cause the least amount of harm as possible, right? So if they have a piece of wood, get a bigger piece of wood, right? Like if you need to cause harm to stop this harm from coming, just do the least amount of harm as possible to stop the harm from coming. But ultimately, if you needed to kill that person, you could do that without any guilt or shame. And you would not experience any unwholesome kamma. You would experience wholesome kamma, because now this being is still alive. And that's the results of that person's decision. You didn't go out into the world trying to kill somebody. You were just responding to this harm that was coming to you. So it's important to see that the Buddha is not teaching you to preserve all life at all cost. That's what people sometimes see when they learn teachings like this. He's teaching you to eliminate your craving, anger, and ignorance. So if you're killing this intruder into your home, you're not doing it out of craving, anger, and ignorance. You're doing it out of compassion for this being who you are, to ensure that you're not experiencing harm from this person coming in. Then sometimes people ask me about plant-based food, whether or not they should be vegan or not. If you would like to be vegan, you can. This is a choice for each individual person to make. What you're going to notice is that it does produce improved results for you, because whenever you're eating animal flesh, you're eating drugs, hormones, and toxins that are in the animal flesh, and it's causing harm to your body. It is also causing harm to the mind as well. So if you switch to a plant-based food supply, you're going to see that this produces wholesome kamma for you. But whether you choose to do that or not do that, it's a choice for you to make. Because when we choose to eat animals, we are contributing to the death of that animal. And as a result of that decision, when you eat the animal flesh, you're going to be eating drugs, hormones, and toxins as well. And now it's going to affect the health of the body and the health of the mind. That's the kamma that you're experiencing. So any questions here on this particular precept? For those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
I have a question about the plants not being living being. If you take the example of deforestation, for example.
I'm sorry, say again.
The example of deforestation. So it's not killing but it is causing harm, I believe so. So what is the...
Are you saying like if you're eliminating the trees, that it's causing harm to the animals because they don't have a habitat to be able to live life? Is that what you're talking about, deforestation?
Yes.
Okay. So what we've learned over the years is that if we're going to cut down a tree, that we should plant maybe 5 or 10 more. Right? There was a period of time where we were cutting down trees and we weren't planting. And this caused harm because we didn't understand. This was the natural law of Kamma, that we were taking away land from animals, and animals needed this. That was the harm we were causing. We were essentially the termites right? The termites eating the home, and now harm came to the termites. We were doing the same thing. We were out there destroying the habitat of animals, and now the harm we experienced is our environment was affected, that we had less oxygen and things like this. We didn't have the ability to absorb CO2 and things of this in our environment. So now people have become wise to that, and they saw the unwise decisions that we were making and that we needed to plant. So the harm is not from the cutting. That's not causing the harm. The harm was that we weren't planting, because we need these resources in order to sustain our life, but we need to plant at the same time. Okay, we have a question coming in on YouTube. The question is Buddhist teachings comparable to Christ conscious or universal consciousness? So it really depends on what you're thinking about with Christ consciousness and universal consciousness. The Buddha never taught that there's one consciousness in the world. I think that's what you're talking about. Sometimes people think that way, but that's not true. There's not just one consciousness. There's individual minds, and we're all making individual decisions. And the Buddha's teachings are teaching you to purify your own mind, because when you're making decisions through the pollutions of craving, anger, and ignorance, more specifically the 10 fetters, now when you make those decisions through those pollutions, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. So if you purify your mind, you'll get to the point where your mind's completely stable and steady and peaceful, that it's completely joyful. But as long as you have these pollutions of the mind, your mind's going to be shaken up, and you're not going to be able to experience the peace and the joy. So if you're thinking about this Christ consciousness or universal consciousness as one big consciousness in the world, this isn't true. There's no evidence of this whatsoever. It's a belief that people are having, and they're clinging to that perception, and now it's misleading them about what their ultimate goal in this life is. This ultimate goal is to be able to purify your own mind, not to change other people, but instead to focus on your own mind. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions here. All right, I don't see anything, or maybe we do. What is this? Let's see. 1 second. Oh, no. Okay.
I do have another question.
Oh, you have another question? Sure.
Yeah, about vegan product or like any kind of consumption of anything. If I would say the original is harming, like, buying meat, for example, or buying any product that is known that there is some harming in the very beginning, but in between there is like many things happening, like going to the store, all of that. Yeah. So what is the Buddha teaching about that? Yeah, so the Buddha doesn't have specific teachings because, the conglomerate of product development didn't really exist during his lifetime, but we can understand that we can practice this from the middle way, right? So like if we know, for example, a certain manufacturer is using child labor and they're working them extensively, then we as wise, compassionate individuals would probably choose not to purchase that particular product, right? Because it's contributing to the harm of these children. We're not causing the harm directly by choosing to purchase the product, but if we were aware that this was occurring, people would choose not to purchase this product, and that's the Kamma of that particular company. But if you were to try to research every single product that you purchase to the level of detail to see what type of labor they're using in order to produce that product, you'd have endless amount of work to be able to do, because like one mobile phone may have 50, 100 different manufacturers that are putting devices and things inside of this mobile phone. So this is where you need to have the middle way, right? Where you're not having worry and anxiety about every little problem that's in the world, but you're also not just like walking through life indifferent either and could care less. So when I purchased this mobile phone, I purchased the mobile phone because I know that it's going to work well for me. If there's some manufacturer somewhere along the supply chain that is using child labor to produce it, I'm not making that decision. It's that company that's making that decision, and they're going to experience the results of that. And should I ever find out that that's the case, I would stop buying this mobile phone, but that's not the case, right? Like that's not
any understanding that I have about this particular mobile phone. So you need to find the middle way and figure out, what is it that you're able to do? How deeply are you able to look at these things? Because you have all kinds of decisions that you need to make in your day-to-day life, and you can't drill down to the micro level of every single decision you're going to make. So you need to be able to find that middle way, make wise decisions, and if you know that a certain product is causing harm, then you would choose not to use that particular thing, perhaps, and that would be a wise choice in that situation. Okay, so now we'll go to the second precept. The second precept, the Buddha says, abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given, without stealing. Here, the Buddha is teaching not to steal, of course, right? Because the mind stealing is coming from craving, anger, and ignorance, right? Because the mind's like, I want that thing, and I don't want to work for it. I'm going to steal it from you. And now when I steal it, I'm causing harm to that person, and that's coming from my ill will towards that person. And now that's coming from my ignorance. So the Buddha is teaching you not to steal because it's knocking down your craving, anger, and ignorance, which is producing unwholesome results for you. Because you can't cause somebody else to be discontent, but you can cause them harm. If I stole somebody's car, for example, this individual isn't able to get to work, right? They're not able to go earn a living in order to sustain their life. They're not maybe able to take their children to school. They're not able to go to the store and buy the basic necessities that they need in order to acquire to live life, right? So stealing someone's car is coming from my own craving, my own ill will, and my own ignorance. And now I'm going to experience the results of that. I can get beat up, I can get murdered, I can get arrested, people will steal from me. These are all things that are going to happen as part of your unwise decisions, right? Then the Buddha doesn't say this specifically up here, but we can see this through what he is teaching, is that it would be unwise to assume that we could use something, right? Like if you were to hand in a college paper at a college class in a university, and let's just say the professor is out of the room and you see a stapler on their desk, if you just assume that you could use that and started stapling, you're assuming that you can use this. You're taking what is not given, right? And now when the professor walks in and they see you're using their stapler, they're like, hey, what are you doing? That's my stapler, right? Maybe they're attached to their stapler, right? And now they get angry and they're attributing their anger to you. They think you're the one causing their anger because they don't understand the Four Noble Truths, right? And now they might fail you on the paper. And maybe they fail you in the entire class, right? Where what you could have done is just waited for the professor to come back in and say, Professor, can I use your stapler? And they're either going to say yes or no. And if they say yes, great, thank you so much, I'll use your stapler. If they say no, okay, I understand. And now you go find one somewhere else. Right? And now you've protected your decision. You're going to experience wholesome results in this situation. So assuming that something can be used is very unwise, right? We'd like to make sure you're making a wise decision there. But remember, this isn't black and white, right? This isn't always do it this way or never do it that way. Because if I was out in my village and one of the other villagers was doing some yard work and they had cut themselves and they were bleeding profusely out of their arm, and one of my other neighbors has a fabric on their front porch, and I could grab that fabric and put on a tourniquet and save this person's life, I would do that. I'm not going to ring the doorbell and be like waiting while this person's bleeding out. I'm not going to wait for my neighbor to come downstairs, talk to them. By the way, can I use this? No, I'm just going to grab that fabric, wrap up a tourniquet, get them in the ambulance and gone. And then when they're gone, then I'm going to go to the neighbor and say, hey, neighbor, I'm so sorry. I apologize. I used this fabric that was on your front porch. I would like to fix this. Can you tell me where you purchased this so that I can go buy you a new one? Or can I just give you the money for it? What would you prefer? I really apologize that I used this, right? right? So the Buddha's not saying never do it this way or always do it that way. You need to move to this higher consciousness and decide for yourself what will be wise. But knowing this precept, you're not just going to take that fabric and do nothing. You're going to take the fabric, use it to save the person's life, and then go check in with the neighbor and make sure you solve this, right? So that's what the Buddha's teaching you here, is to move to a higher consciousness and think through the decisions you're making. Same thing with accepting what is given. The Buddha teaches you that when someone gives you a gift, to accept it. And the reason why is because when someone's practicing generosity, it's enhancing the quality of their mind. If you were to shut down their gift, it doesn't allow them to practice generosity and enhance the quality of their mind. So if your grandmother is giving you this sweater that you know that you'll never wear a day in your life, the Buddha just teaches you to accept it, because it's helping grandma's mind to be able to let go and get closer to enlightenment. But now what you do is, now that you thank grandma for the sweater, you give it to someone else if you're not going to wear it. Because otherwise you're going to put it in your closet and it's going to sit there for 20 or 30 years and deteriorate and nobody gets to use it. Well, if grandma gets angry that you gave her the sweater away, then she didn't practice pure generosity. She had an expectation that you were going to wear that sweater, right? So there's no harm in giving the sweater to somebody else, because this sweater might go through 6, 8, 10 different hands. And now the person who's going to wear it and cherish it and enjoy it every single moment, they finally found it, right? It's like, oh my goodness, that's the most beautiful sweater I've ever seen. And now they might wear it every single day because they enjoy it so much, right? So you can practice generosity yourself. Some people think of this, they call it re-gifting, and they think it's unwise. But there's nothing harmful in choosing to give somebody something. Sometimes in our village, people are growing bananas or different things in our village, and they will give us like this huge thing of bananas. We can't even eat all those bananas, right? So we break them up and we give them to other people, right? Or I bring them here and share them with you guys, right? So there's no harm in sharing with other people. But remember, this isn't black and white. If somebody offered you crystal methamphetamine or heroin, are you going to accept what is given? Probably not, right? You're not going to accept that. So this isn't always do it this way or never do it this way. It's use your higher consciousness and think what would be wise in the situation. If someone's giving you a gift and you know they have expectations of you, it would be unwise to accept it, right? Because they're not practicing pure generosity, right? If someone's giving you a gift and they think by me giving you this gift, you're going to buy this thing from me, and now if you don't buy that thing from them, they're going to be angry, it would be unwise for you to accept this gift, right? So you need to be able to look at these kinds of things. Then the Buddha teaches you awaiting what is given. What this means is that you don't load people up with expectations to get you something. Like if you lived with a life partner and they were going on a business trip, you wouldn't be interested in loading them up with a bunch of expectations of what to get you. Because now they're running around town trying to find you things. And when they come back, if they have the stuff you wanted, now you're happy. But if they don't, you're upset or angry. It puts strain on your relationship. Instead, just await what is given, right? If they would like to bring you something, great. That's their choice. They chose to do that. But if you put expectations on them, that's going to cause challenges in your relationship. But again, it's not black and white. I've had students come here and they said, hey, David, I'm going back to the USA. I'll be there for 6 weeks. Is there anything I can bring you? Would you like something from the USA? In this case, they're practicing generosity, right? They're offering to give me something, right? And in those cases, there's only been a few of them. I've said, sure, here's something that I would be able to use from the USA. If you're going to be there, that'd be great. But if you can't get it, no worries, no big deal. I'll be just fine, right? So you need to be able to look at each situation, right? You're not interested in telling the person what you wanted. So when this person told me they were going to the USA, I didn't say, oh, get me this and get me this and get me that and get me this. This person offered. And that's different. Okay, so you guys have any questions on this precept? No, you have a question? Okay.
Yes, I do. About accepting what is given, I remember, for example, Christmas meal with the family, and they can give a lot, and like kind of sometimes insist to eat even more. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like wondering, what to do with this situation. I mean, I could just like take all the food and give it to someone. I could, but in the moment I would probably say no, thank you. I'm not hungry anymore.
Yeah. So if somebody's putting their expectations on you of trying to get you to do something, that's coming from their craving, from their expectations. And the last thing you're interested in doing is meeting other people's expectation. So that example I gave earlier in the last class, where I was saying how my family was like, you need to get a girlfriend, you need to spend time with us. After that, I went to them and I said, hey, look, guys, I'm not going to ever live up to your expectations. And that's not even my goal anyway. If I were you, I would eliminate your expectations because I'm never going to try to meet your expectations. And they were shocked that I did that, right? But that's essentially the mindset that you would like to have. Not that you have to go and tell your family these kinds of things. I did choose to do that because I wasn't necessarily practicing what I'm practicing now. But in your mind, whenever somebody's putting expectations on you, you would like to not adopt those expectations of yourself. Because now, if you meet those expectations, you'll be happy. But if you don't, you'll be angry and sad and frustrated. So if somebody's trying to put a lot of food on you and trying to push food on you, you can say things like, oh, I've had a lot of food. I feel completely comfortable with what I've eaten so far. I don't need any more food, or whatever it is you're going to say based on your personality. And if they're like, no, you need more food. You need more food. Oh, okay. And you might just walk away. Or you might say, yeah, I understand what you're saying, or whatever you would like to say. You could even do the thing that you just mentioned, where you could say, well, I'm not going to eat any more food today, but if you would like to give me this food, I will take it home with me and maybe find somebody else to give it to. If you'd like me to do that, I can do that for you, right? You can do those kinds of things. But the last thing you're interested in doing is adopting their expectation, because it's like feeding a monster. If you try to meet their expectations and their cravings, they're just going to keep doing that to you more and more and more and more and more. It's like feeding a monster. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay. All right.
I do have another question.
Another one? Yeah.
About assuming something can be taken. Like, what if the example of if I'm walking in the street and I find something on in the soil and that I could get for myself? Let's say a cap, for example.
A what?
A cap, for example.
Oh, okay.
A hat or whatever. So
like somebody dropped it in... Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if someone's dropped it, but I just found it on the floor.
Okay.
And there is apparently no one around.
Yeah. So if there's an item that you've found and you know it's not yours, the best thing to do is, if you can, to find out how to return it to the owner, right? And if you can't, is to just leave it there. Right? Because then maybe the person realizes that they dropped it and they'll come back and get it. Whereas if you pick it up, it's somebody else's. And now when you pick it up, like let's just say you're wearing that hat and now they see you at the park, they're going to be like, hey, that's my hat. And they're going to be angry and frustrated. And now you might end up in a fight. Right? And now they might try to harm this body. Whereas if you just leave it there, knowing that it's not yours, and this person comes and finds it, excellent. And if someone else chooses to pick it up and take it, that's on them. But you're not interested in taking what is not given in these types of situations. But if you could return it to somebody, like say it's a wallet and it has their address and their phone number and stuff, now you can pick it up and return it to them. That would be your generosity and your compassion choosing to do that. But you're not required to do that. You don't have to do that, but that is an option that you could take.
All right. And if I met this person at the park later and I'm, oh, okay, great. So I can give you back this cap that I found.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
You could do it that way, but oftentimes, I shouldn't say oftentimes, there's the potential for this person to see the cap that you're wearing it and immediately get angry and immediately start wanting to fight you and harm you. That's where it's better to not take that thing and just leave it where it's at. That's going to produce the best results for you, the wholesome Kamma. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. When I was in London, I worked as a carpenter, and I would travel home in my work clothes, which are often at the end of the day very dirty, lots of sawdust or scruffy. They were old clothes. They had a couple of holes in them here and there. And I was sitting on a wall waiting for a friend, and this lady came by, much older than me, and she had very old shoes. Her clothes were very, very tatty. She was pushing a trolley which was rattling and shaking. This lady clearly had very little. And she saw me, and I think mistakenly mistook me for maybe a homeless person. And she then offered me, I think, I can't recall, it was 50 pence or £1. And she wanted to give it to me. And I could see that this lady was giving this out of the kindness of her heart, you know. And I thought I was earning a ton of money. She had nothing. This lady needed this pound a lot more than me. And I thought, but then again, there's this unbelievable act of generosity here. And I took the money. Did I do the right thing or not?
I don't think about it as right or wrong, because that's to assume that there's only one right way and then everything else is the wrong way and things like that. But what you did was wise, because this person was practicing generosity and you accepted that. You shouldn't ever put yourself in a situation where you think that this person needs the money more than me, because this is like judging them, and you don't really know what's going on in that person's life. You never know. They could have been a multimillionaire, right? And just like you were dressed the way that you were dressed, and she assumed that you needed some money, right? So that would be to judge somebody else. So if somebody's offering you something, you just accept it, because they're making the choice that I don't need this and I would like to give it to somebody else. And now you would like to support that enhancement of their mind, that they're practicing generosity. Because if you shut it down, it's shutting down their ability to practice that generosity and enhance the quality of their mind. And if you did that enough with enough people around you, people would stop practicing generosity with you. Because if somebody's practicing generosity and you accept their gift, wonderful, right? And if they're practicing generosity and you didn't accept their gift, let's just say you didn't accept their gift. If they're practicing pure generosity, they would be completely fine, right? But because the vast majority of the world isn't practicing these teachings, oftentimes when they are practicing generosity, they at least have the expectation that you will accept their generosity. And if you reject their generosity, they will typically get painful feelings. They're going to attribute those painful feelings to you, thinking that you're the one causing their feelings. And now they're going to push you aside. They're going to be bitter, harsh, and hostile, or start putting their expectations on you. So one of the things that the Buddha is teaching you is, yes, to purify your mind and get to enlightenment, but he's also teaching you how to navigate the world full of unenlightened beings. That unenlightened beings, when they're practicing generosity with you, they're going to probably have an expectation that you will take their gift. And if you don't, they're going to experience painful feelings. And with their lack of wisdom, they're going to think it's you that's causing it. And now you're going to experience the unwholesome results of that. Now they're going to be bitter, harsh, and hostile with you. They're going to push you aside. They're going to start trying to force you to take their stuff. They're expecting you. So if you just smile and say, wow, thank you so much, I really appreciate that. And now maybe you give it to someone else at some point. This will protect your relationship with that person, and you'll experience wholesome results. So that's what the Buddha is teaching you, is how to get along with unenlightened beings, among other things, in terms of eliminating your craving, anger, and ignorance. This is one of the things that you do in your journey to enlightenment, is as you're practicing these teachings and you're doing things a certain way, you're going to see other people aren't practicing those same things. And now the more wisdom that you have about how to navigate the world of unenlightened beings, you'll experience more and more peace and more joy. Yeah. Okay. So now let's go to the third one. Here the Buddha says, abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relations with women, men who are protected by their mother, father, mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. So this is typically translated as no sexual misconduct, Well, that doesn't tell you anything about anything, right? This is the detail that you really need in order to be able to understand what the Buddha is talking about. Because you can choose to have sex if that's what you're choosing to do, but you can also do it in a harmful way that's causing harm. And if you cause harm, harm's going to come back to you. And one of the strongest cravings that the mind will tend to have is sexual craving. So if there's a strong craving, there's the potential that you would make unwise decisions and it will produce unwholesome results for you. So the Buddha is giving you guidance on how to make decisions about your sexual activity in a way that doesn't cause harm. So firstly, he's talking about eliminating sex with minors. This is up here, where he's talking about having sex with people who are protected by their family. Right? If we were to have sex with an 8-year-old child or a 12-year-old child, it's causing harm to that child and the family too, because the family is trying to help this child to grow and develop. And if we were to kind of lure that away and kind of impact their mind through this sexual activity, it's going to cause a lot of harm to the person and to the family as well. So that's why it's unwise to have sex with minors. And in most places in the world, the human laws match with the natural law of Kamma, but there's some places in the world where it's actually legal to have sex with minors. You could have sex with an 8-year-old child, 10-year-old child, and you would not have any unwholesome results from the government, right? The government would not arrest you. But if you look at those types of places that are doing that, their political system is very unstable. Their economy is very much struggling. They're having a lot of difficulties in their society because people are having sex at such a young age, and it's such a normal thing, and people's minds are impacted in a big way through that. So that's why the Buddha teaches you it would be unwise to do that, because the unwholesome karma that it's going to generate by choosing to have sex with such young children. Up here where the Buddha says, whose violation entails a penalty, that's sex without consent. That's like raping somebody. That's where you can get murdered, you can get beat up, you can get injured, you can get sexually transmitted diseases. These are all things that happen. That's the unwholesome result of our choice to have sex without consent. And that's why the Buddha teaches us that it's unwise. Up here where he says abandoning unchastity, this would be sex with multiple partners. What chastity is, if you're familiar with ancient times, fathers used to put metal underwear on their daughters, and the father would have a lock and a key, and it was only the father that could open up these metal underwear. I can imagine walking around with metal underwear, but people did that during these times. That would be chastity. That's like having sex with nobody, right? Well, unchastity would be just the opposite, right? Is having sex with lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people. So abandoning unchastity is to eliminate this constant having sex. That's from the animal world. When we're animals, we go around and have sex with lots of different dogs and cats and buffalo and squirrels. Like they're just having sex with lots of different people or lots of different partners. They're not loyal to any one particular partner, right? And that's where you get sexually transmitted diseases. That's where you can get beat up and murdered because people can get jealous, right? You can lose your material possessions, where people destroy your material possessions because they're attached and they become jealous. You can lose your reputation in the community. This is the unwholesome results of our unwise decision to go out and have sex with lots and lots of people. There's some cultures where you might decide to meet somebody, you're going to get married to this person, or you are married to this person, and you've talked to your family and they've agreed for you to move into the home, and you're maybe starting your life living with your parents, and then you're going to save money, and then you're going to go out and get your own house at some point. If you're doing this type of thing, the family has accepted their relationship, and this is still practicing this precept. This isn't what the Buddha is talking about when he says protected by their mother, father, so forth and so on. That in this situation, the family has agreed, yes, you and your partner can move into our house, save money, and then whenever you're ready, move out. So if you're choosing to have sex in that situation, the family has accepted it, and it's understandable, right? You're not going to experience any unwholesome results in that situation. Up here where the Buddha says, who are protected by teachings, what he's saying here is people who have decided to remain celibate. there's some people who choose not to have sex any longer. This would be somebody who's choosing to move from like the second stage of enlightenment to the third stage of enlightenment, because you can still have a sexual relationship and get to the second stage of enlightenment. And that's typically what people do, especially when they're younger, that you might continue to have sex. You have a partner, you're having sex. Maybe you'd like to have kids someday. You haven't even had kids yet. So they might still be having sex. And you can actually get to that second stage of enlightenment, and your discontentedness will be significantly reduced, but you're still going to have discontentedness in that second stage. So you can do all the other work on the path to enlightenment while still having a sexual relationship. But then at some point, when you and your partner have decided that you're not interested in having sex anymore, that's where you might move beyond the second stage of enlightenment. Because as long as you have a craving for sex, in some situations, you're going to get it and you're going to feel happy with that and excited. But then when you can't get it, you're going to be agitated or frustrated or annoyed. So you can't get to permanent peace and permanent joy as long as you have a craving for sexual activity and sexual contact. So the second stage of enlightenment, that individual still has sensual desire. They can do all the other work on the path to enlightenment. And they'll get to the point where they're quite peaceful, but they're still going to have agitation and frustration because they can't get sex all the time when their mind wants it. In some situations they can, in other situations they cannot. So if you would like to get to the third and then ultimately the fourth stage of enlightenment, where the mind is actually enlightened, you'll need to let go of sexual activity. But when or if you ever do that, it's a choice for you to make. And everybody's going to do that at a different time if they choose to do it. We're not going to be on our deathbed still having sex. At some point, it is going to come to an end, and we get to decide as an individual practitioner when that's going to be. So when we decide to do that and we're moving to enlightenment, that's the very best thing that could ever happen for you, is to get to enlightenment. Because you getting to enlightenment means that you no longer experience any discontentedness, and you're not going to experience rebirth over and over and over again. And you getting to enlightenment, the people around you are also going to be able to get wisdom to be able to get to enlightenment as well. So you getting to enlightenment, or a person getting to enlightenment, would be the very best thing ever. So if we choose to try to lure that person away from the path to enlightenment and choosing to have sex with them, this is going to cause harm to that person and to all the people around them, because now they're not going to be able to get the wisdom to get to enlightenment. So the Buddha teaches you that if somebody has decided to not have sex any longer, that it would be unwise for you to try to lure them away from that, because it's causing harm to them and all the people around them. So here in Thailand, they make this really easy for you, that people who wear orange robes and shave their hair, they're not having sex any longer, or they're not supposed to. So you would choose not to have sex with those types of people. Or here in Thailand, if you're wearing white and you shave your hair, you're also choosing not to have sex. I don't wear white because I need to advertise to people that I'm not having sex. I don't have sex any longer, but that's not why I'm wearing white. But I just give you guys a heads up that people who wear white and shave their hair and they're wearing their clothing that way every day, that's someone who's chosen to not have sex. That's what it should be. And that's what an ordained practitioner should be choosing as well, as part of them ordaining. So you can steer clear of this by choosing to have sex with someone who's not wearing those types of clothing and they're not shaving their hair and so forth. Here, where people are already committed in relationships, or sex outside of a relationship you're committed to, that's the unchastity, right? If you chose to have sex outside of a relationship you're committed to, you're causing harm here. Or if you were to lure someone away from their relationship to have sex, you're causing harm in the situation. You can get murdered, you can get beat up, you can lose your material possessions, you can lose your reputation in the community. That's the unwholesome results of choosing to do that kind of thing. Then sex with people who are human trafficked. Would be people who are being forced to have sex against their will. Typically there's money involved, that someone's paying for that sexual service. In these kinds of environments, you can get sexually transmitted diseases, you can get beat up and murdered, you can get robbed when you go into those kinds of environments, you can get all kinds, you can get arrested, for these kinds of things. These are the unwholesome results of choosing to do that. Sometimes there's paid services where people are willingly choosing to offer their services. In this situation, it's still unchastity because they're having sex with multiple people, and so are you. And that's where, again, you can get beat up, murdered, you can get robbed, you can lose your material wealth, you can get sexually transmitted diseases. That's the results of the unwise decisions. Notice the Buddha doesn't say anything about same-gender relationships here. Right? He was aware of them because he talks about it in his teachings, essentially, but he doesn't put it as part of this particular precept because there's no harm that's being caused. Two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex, they're not causing harm to anybody. So if it's a male or female or male and female, they're not choosing to cause harm to anybody. It's two loyal, loving, consenting adults, right? So this has been going on since the beginning of history, that there's never been a time in human history where everybody had sex with the opposite gender. Because if that was the case, that would be permanence. And we understand the universal truth of impermanence, that not everyone's going to be interested in having sex with the opposite gender. Then we can understand not only same-gender relationships with someone through the universal truth of impermanence, that if you or someone you know has same-gender relationships, they're not causing any harm, right? We can understand that through these teachings. This is how wise the Buddha was, that 2,500 years ago, he already understood this. We can also understand transgender individuals, that this is completely normal, that the body is one thing and the mind is something completely different. And now when they come together, the mind isn't always going to identify with the same sexual organs as the body. If so, that would be permanence. And we understand the universal truth of impermanence, that sometimes the mind is going to identify with a different gender than the sexual organs. That's impermanence, right? Nowadays, there's people who crave permanence, and now they're upset and angry just because somebody else is choosing to identify in a different way as their sexual organs. But we can understand the universal truth of impermanence, that this is normal, right? We can also understand through the cycle of rebirth that if somebody has been male, but now that mind is being reborn into a new body, and this body has organs of a female, their mind is identifying as a male because they've been male so many other times. And the same thing can happen female, and now that mind is in a male body, and now that mind is identifying as a female, when in reality the sexual organs are male, right? So this is completely normal, and it's not causing harm to anybody, right? If that person identifies as a male or female, it's up to them. It's not causing harm to others. So people's craving, anger, and ignorance, they're causing their own anger in these situations. So if you or someone you know is either having same-gender relationships or they're a transgender individual, they're not causing harm to anybody whatsoever. You're not causing harm to anybody whatsoever. And if someone gets mad or angry at you because of that, that's their anger. You're not actually causing it, right? Sometimes students ask me about masturbation. This can actually be used in a beneficial way, but it can also be harmful. Depends on how you're using it. Sometimes people like to look at it as black and white, that it's all bad or it's all good. Well, you need to be able to look at the situation of what's actually transpiring here. That if you're reducing your sensual desire, that would be beneficial. But if you're increasing your sensual desire, this is actually causing harm to your own mind. So masturbation can actually be used to decrease your sensual desire. Maybe somebody's listening to this talk and maybe they have 5 or 10 different boyfriends or girlfriends, and they're like, you know what? The Buddha was so accurate here that I should only have one partner. And now maybe they try to bring their relationships down to one person, but they have this really high sexual craving in their mind. And maybe they use some masturbation to be able to bring that down and knock it down so they can get to just one partner. This was beneficial. Masturbation helped them, right? Or let's just say somebody had a craving to go rape somebody, and now they use masturbation instead. Hey, that was helpful, right? That was really beneficial for them. They didn't go out and rape somebody. They just did some masturbation, and now they didn't cause harm to other people, right? One of the things that you might understand this as is if you know about these dams, there's like these large multi-million-dollar projects where they are built to hold back water, and it's to save a town so that it doesn't get flooded. Well, these multi-million-dollar projects, they would like to protect the dam so that when the water builds up and it puts a lot of pressure on the dam, there's only so much water that this dam can hold back. So rather than damage the dam, they actually open it up and release the water so that the pressure goes down. And now when the water goes down, they close the dam again, right? And this protects the dam, right? So that it doesn't get destroyed, and it protects the town as well. Well, if your mind is trying to work on reducing or eliminating your sexual craving, you can get a lot of pressure in the mind and you can feel this overwhelming urge to have sex. Well, you might decide to use some masturbation in order to knock that down. And then maybe you went 1 week without sex and then you knocked down that pressure, and now you can go 2 weeks. That was really beneficial. And now you go 2 weeks and now you knock down the pressure. And now maybe you can go 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And then maybe you knock down the pressure and then you can go 6 months or 9 months without having sex, right? So this is decreasing your sensual desire by using some masturbation. But also someone could use it excessively where maybe they're masturbating 10, 15, 20 times a day, and now it's increasing their sensual desire, right? So you need to be able to make sure that you look at how you're using masturbation and use it to decrease your sensual desire rather than increase it. Sex with animals is one of the few things that are black and white. An animal can't give us consent to have sex with it. And I imagine if somebody tried to do that, they would get injured or get diseases and things like this. So it would be unwise to do that. Pornography is something sometimes students ask me about. Pornography is oftentimes from the mind having a craving for intimacy and sexual contact, and it tends to go down this path of pornography, looking at images and videos and things like this. And oftentimes when the mind gets really deep into that, it's hard to get back out of it. And even when you get out of it, the sexual experiences that you're having with a human being aren't quite as fulfilling because the mind is kind of in this fantasy world with pornography that it finds it hard to enjoy these experiences with the actual live partner again. So if you're interested in intimacy, I would encourage you to go down the path of getting a partner rather than towards pornography, because that's going to allow your mind to hold on to that and crave, and it's going to produce difficulties and challenges within your own mind. So I wrote a lot about all of these in the book. You guys can see this where I've explored it in a lot more detail, but this is just giving you a summary. Do you guys have any questions on any of these things that we were just talking about? No? Okay. I don't see any questions online either. Oh, you got something, Eamon? Okay.
Thank you. It's such an emotive subject, this, sexuality and how it's expressed or not expressed. But it's curious. I think that although the Buddha isn't black or white, there's a lot of warnings here. So I'm thinking that 2,600 years ago, this was still an issue. But some of
It's still on. It was still on. You actually turned it off.
So much of this seems like moral dilemmas. And if that's the case, then it's my conscience that comes in, thinking what I think is right and what I think is wrong. Mm-hmm. I was brought up in a part of the world where if however unhelpful expectations are, mm-hmm. I have cultural expectations. Mm-hmm. I know that I don't want to enter into a relationship with someone else's wife, not just because I think it's wrong, it's because I just don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. But I could live in another part of the world, and that's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. So how much what the Buddha's teaching is conscience, and how much of it is geography? It's like, there are some parts of the world where children are, by consent of their parents, are married off to perhaps a wealthier family. Yeah. And thinking that as young as pre-teen, but that's the culturally acceptable. And I think, but my conscience was like, that's absolutely horrific. This is terrible.
So the Buddha isn't teaching you based on culture. He's not teaching you based on geography or anything like that. He's teaching you the natural laws. And that's why I give you a lot of examples for you to be able to see the truth for yourself. So there are places where you can legally have sex with an 8-year-old child, and the people around you, they will look at that as, there's no harm in this because those people's minds have been conditioned to think that this is just fine. But if you look at those societies, you'll see their political system, their economy, their educational system isn't really well established, and the population of people are living a very strained life, right? Or like having sex with multiple partners, where you would choose not to have sex with another person's wife, where there's some places that they have sex with multiple partners as a married couple, right? Well, you can look at the truth of this and see the true reality, because the Buddha is teaching you the natural law, that if you choose to do that, you're very likely to have sexually transmitted diseases. You can get beat up and murdered, right? Because people can get jealous, even though they're saying like, hey, you can have sex with my wife, here you go. And now you have sex with their wife, and now all of a sudden the wife becomes closer to you than the husband, and now the husband gets jealous and wants to murder you or fight you or destroy your property. You can see the unwholesome results of this. And again, sexually transmitted diseases and all these other things. That's where you've got to cut through the culture. You've got to cut through what people's minds have been conditioned to think and be able to see true reality of what's truly happening by me choosing to have sex with this person's wife. If you were to ever do that, even though it sounds like you wouldn't, what would be the result of that? What is the potential of what could occur here? And at the very least, when I've talked with couples that have sex with multiple partners like this, their relationship isn't very stable. It isn't very loyal and very faithful. They tend to lack trust in their relationships. They tend to never feel the loyalty and commitment. They never really build up their relationship together. There's usually a certain amount of sadness and frustration and argumentative nature to their relationship. So you can see this cause and effect. And that's where you got to be able to cut through all the cultural norms that people abide by and be able to see the true reality for yourself of what's truly occurring as a result of this decision. And that's where you can come to understand the natural law of Kamma very clearly. Okay. So now we'll go to this one. This one's very straightforward. The Buddha says abandoning false speech. Oh,
I'm
you have
sorry
a question?
to interrupt. I do have one more question about this topic. If we take the same example of someone having sex with the wife of someone else, let's imagine that there is no, like the husband doesn't know, and there is never like a fight or something like that, but the person who is having sex with the wife is maybe can have like issues with himself, like morally, or like doesn't feeling good about that, but still continuing. I'm just wondering, like, if there is no like physical harm from someone else, and just like physical, mental or physical harms with themselves. Is there anything about that?
Yeah, that's part of the unwholesome Kamma that you're experiencing. I had a student one time who, her and her husband were swingers, right? They went out and would have sex with multiple partners, and they would go to parties, and they would go out to dinner with another couple, and then afterwards, the wife would go with the other husband, and this wife would go with the other husband, and they were all agreeing that this would occur, right? And nobody was not agreeing to it. But the woman that was learning with me, she was on all kinds of antidepressant medications. She was having suicidal thoughts. She was having all kinds of other problems with her children. She had adult children, and she was having difficulties in those relationships too. These are the unwholesome results because the mind is operating through craving, which is in this case craving for bodily pleasure and having sex with so many different partners. There's not going to be just craving in that area. there's going to be craving and anger and ignorance in other areas too. And now your life is having all these difficulties and all these struggles. So the discontentedness is part of the unwholesome kamma that an individual is experiencing as a result of their craving, their anger, and their ignorance. So even if there's nothing external that's happening, like sexually transmitted diseases, destruction of material possessions, bodily injury and stuff like that, there's still the internal part that you're having to deal with inside your own mind. That's part of the unwholesome kamma. All right. So now let's go to this one. This one's pretty straightforward. Abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. So this one is oftentimes translated to no lying, where that doesn't give you any kind of information whatsoever, right? That's not what the Buddha said. It sounds like black and white. It sounds like rules and commandments. The Buddha is explaining to you why it's unwise to lie, because then you're not going to be a true speaker, one to be relied on and dependable. Because if you lie in your personal, professional life, people are going to find those lies out, and then they're going to not consider you to be trustworthy and dependable. So now when this boss is looking to staff this new project, they're not going to staff you, right? So your career is hindered from growth and development because you're constantly lying, right? So you would like to be trustworthy, dependable, someone that can be relied on. And now you'll be able to experience lots of wonderful things in development of your career, your professional life, and your personal life. Whereas if you go out in the world and lie, not only are you going to be hindered in those ways, but your mind is having to obsessively figure out, what did I say to one person versus another versus another? So you would like to get to the point where you're always speaking the truth, because then you can just be at ease. When somebody asks you a question, you just speak the truth. You don't have to figure out, well, what did I say to that person? What did I say to this person? What did I say to that person? How can you get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life if you're having to do that? So by speaking the truth, your mind can just be at ease. You just always speak the truth. The Buddha understood this so well that I put this other teaching in here too, where he's teaching his son, Rahula. Sometimes people think the Buddha left his family and he never came back. This isn't actually true. He taught his son, he taught his wife, he taught his mother, he taught other members of the royal family. They came and ordained with him, and these people actually got to enlightenment during his lifetime. So this is him teaching his son, Rahula. And he's explaining to his son how unwise it is to tell a lie, even as a joke. Right? If you can imagine this Buddha, this really wise individual who's sharing the natural laws and helping people get to this enlightened mental state. If like this, he was telling the truth, but over here he's lying, like people wouldn't know whether to trust his words or not. So the Buddha understood the natural law of Kamma so well that even when he told a joke, he didn't lie, right? He even told the truth during jokes. Now, these are a lot more challenging. It takes a lot more wisdom to be able to tell those kind of jokes, but they're usually a lot more funny, right? So you might not associate a Buddha as someone who tells jokes, but a Buddha tells jokes, right? Their mind is cheerful, they're bright, they're uplifted. Usually what you see is the Buddha sitting in meditation and being very solemn and serious, but that's just how people depict him. That's not how an enlightened being functions. An enlightened being is cheerful, they're bright, they're uplifted. Sure, they can be serious if they need to be, but they're cheerful and they're bright and they're uplifted. So a Buddha has a personality. They have a character, right? They're going to be funny and have jokes and charisma and things like this, right? So you can have fun as an enlightened being. In fact, you're going to have even more fun as an enlightened being than you ever did as an unenlightened being. So a Buddha tells jokes, but when they do so, they tell the truth, right? So if you're going to tell jokes, not only would it be wise to tell the truth, but be sure you're not degrading and diminishing people. If you're degrading and diminishing other people or even yourself, this isn't a good way to tell jokes. So you can learn how to tell bright and cheerful and uplifted jokes. And this is going to bring a lot of wonderful things into your life if you choose to joke in this way. And it'll help you to develop relationships, both personally and professionally, because then people will see you as dependable, reliable, and trustworthy. So any questions on this one? No questions? Okay. So now the last one. the Buddha says, refraining from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. So again, whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, if there's any words that you don't understand, investigate those words. You're not believing anything. Don't even believe that the way you use words is the same way that the Buddha used it, right? Because there were times where I figured out that I was using words in the way that the English language didn't actually use these words. Because I would see a word in the teachings of the Buddha and I'm like, what is he talking about? I don't even use that word that way. And I looked it up and I realized, whoa, I've been using this word inaccurately. I haven't been using it the way that it's intended to be used. So I looked up this word heedlessness. I kind of knew what it meant, but I was interested to really penetrate into it and investigate it. So what this word heedlessness means is careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, and unmindful. That's what the Buddha is talking about, is eliminating putting substances into your body that's producing these kinds of things. Because if you're putting substances into your body that's producing these kinds of things, you're walking in the opposite direction of enlightenment. Because he's teaching you to cultivate mindfulness and awareness of mind. If you're putting substances in the body that's producing a lack of mindfulness, how can you be aware of what's going on in your own mind to purify it? You're going to need to know what are the wholesome qualities, what are the unwholesome qualities, so that you can eliminate the unwholesome and support and encourage the wholesome. But if you're putting a substance into the body that's promoting heedlessness, now you're unattentive, you're unaware, you're careless, you're thoughtless, unattentive, uncalm, and unmindful, right? So that's going to take you in the opposite direction of enlightenment. And the way that the Buddha taught is he taught in a way that is timeless, that you can apply his teachings from his lifetime all the way through the future, right? So he could have never imagined all the substances that we would have discovered, and he wouldn't have given you an exhaustive list of all those substances. But the way that he taught, he said, if there's any substance that you could put into the body that's producing heedlessness, it would be wise to eliminate this and refrain from it. And if you go and talk to people that are like in prison or jail, they will tell you that they're maybe there for murder or they're there for robbing a bank. But if you really talk to them and say, no, like, why are you really here? About 80% of them will tell you because of substances, because they would have never killed that person if they weren't high on drugs, or they would have never robbed that bank if they didn't have a drug habit to feed, right? So it's substances that is causing the mind to also kill, steal, have sexual misconduct, and lie, right? So this one is really important because it can produce unwise decisions in all these other areas of your life. Right? So the Buddha is not giving you an exhaustive list of every substance to avoid, but if you understand what he's teaching you, you can apply it now and well into the future. So I've put a few up here. I didn't put an exhaustive list either, but I put a few that we can talk about so you can see how to apply this precept. So let's talk about marijuana, right? Marijuana is a substance that can produce heedlessness, but it also has medical properties too, that it can actually be helpful. There's research studies where there's children that have like 20 seizures a day. They give them a little CBD oil on the tongue and they don't have another seizure for 6 months, right? This has like irrefutable evidence that this plant has medical properties, right? So if somebody's going to use this plant for medical purposes, they're usually looking for a high CBD, because the plant has two different sides. The CBD is the medical properties, and the THC is the high that produces the high. So if you're going in looking for a high THC, you're looking to be high. You're looking for heedlessness, and you're using this plant in an unwise way, right? And particularly people that are using it this way, they might actually choose to smoke it, right? And this is causing harm to the lungs, it's causing harm to the physical body. Where someone who's looking to ingest it for medical purposes, they're usually looking at it as an oil or an edible. And you can also get high in those with those as well, but you need to look at the purpose of why you're using it. If you're using it for stress relief or anxiety, marijuana is not going to solve that, right? Because what's causing it is craving, desire, attachment. There's no amount of marijuana that you could take that's going to eliminate your stress and anxiety. So you need to be sure you have a valid medical reason, that it's not just stress or anxiety or something like this, because marijuana is not going to solve that. Cigarettes, we know that this doesn't provide any medical benefits, and that's why more and more people have moved away from those, where at one time a lot of people used to smoke. We saw a lot of mouth cancers, tongue cancers, lung cancers, and all those kinds of things, where now more and more people are getting away from that because there's no medical benefit with it. There's so many substances in there. You're going to need to pay attention to your prescription medications, because even prescription medications, while they're meant to heal and help, there's some that can actually be addictive. So when you're getting a prescription from a doctor, I suggest you be your own best doctor, right? That you research that and you figure out, what is this substance that the doctor is asking me to put into the body? And if what you come back with is that it's addictive and it can be harmful, you might talk to your doctor and ask them, is there another substance that they could prescribe? And in a lot of cases, there's other ones that they can prescribe, that they don't have to give you that one. But in some rare situations, that might be the only medication that you can take. And now, with that wisdom, you'll make better decisions, because you know that this substance is addictive, and you'll make sure you pay attention to it and get off of it as quick as possible. That you just use it for a limited period of time for the purpose that you need it for, and then get off of it, right? So that can be helpful information for you. You might decide to pay attention to your caffeine intake, because even caffeine is a substance that causes heedlessness. It takes the mind up into an excited state with a heightened level of energy, but then you can drop back off and you can crash from that. By the time you get to enlightenment, you have sustainable energy all day long, that you don't get tired, you don't get exhausted. And you'll never be able to cultivate that if you rely on a substance to lift your mind up, because then it's going to crash back down. So if you get away from caffeine, you'll be able to develop this sustainable energy where all day long your mind can be bright and cheerful and uplifted. If you choose to get rid of caffeine, you'll probably go through withdrawal symptoms. You'll have headaches, dry mouth. You might even have shakes and things like this. Let that remind you that you're detoxing from a substance. Just like a person addicted to heroin or methamphetamine or something like this is going to go through detox. You're going to go through detox when you're getting rid of caffeine. Usually takes about 3 days or so. But then when you get to the other side of that, your mind will then be able to produce natural energy, and it'll be able to develop natural energy all day long. So that's the benefit of getting rid of caffeine. You'll even need to pay attention to your sugar intake. We kind of learned this as a child, and we start to get better with that as we age. But if you even took sugar in an excessive amount, it would produce heedlessness, right? Then sometimes people will tell you psychedelic substances are going to help you get to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. Psychedelic substances do create this introspection where you can look inward at the mind. But this is a quality that you're going to actually need all day, throughout your day, all throughout your week, all throughout your month and years in order to get to enlightenment. If you can only be introspective when you take this substance, you're not allowing your mind to develop this introspection to be able to have it all throughout your day and all throughout your week and month. So you can't be talking to your mom about some really complicated decision and be like, hey, Mom, I need to go drop this hit of LSD. I'm going to be right back, right? Or you can't tell your boss like, hey, boss, I need to figure this out. I'm going to go take some of these magic mushrooms and I'll be right back, right? You can't do that. You're going to need to be introspective all day long. So this idea that psychedelic substances are helping you to get to enlightenment, it's actually just the opposite. It's hindering you because you're not able to cultivate that introspection and look inward and cultivate that ability within your own mind, because you're going to need that all throughout your month, all throughout your year to be introspective. And if you rely on a substance, you're not actually cultivating that naturally to be able to have it at all times. Because remember, an enlightened mind is going to be experiencing these permanent mental qualities. And there's nothing permanent about a psychedelic substance. It's going to affect the mind, and it's going to go up and down and up and down. So any questions on this one? Remember, this isn't an exhaustive list. This is just some to actually talk about and help you, because there's plenty of substances out there that you're going to need to look at. Looks like we might have a question coming in here on YouTube. Let's see. How about ADHD and this other medication for ADHD symptoms? If you get the book that I share. I share many books, but if you get this first book, it's called Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. It's volume 1. You can get it for free. You can go to our website, buddhadailywisdom.com, click on free books, and download all the books. Chapter 22 is all about mental health, because the symptoms that people are experiencing with something like ADHD, the symptoms are 100% real, but the cause of them is actually not biological. What people are doing is they're trying to tweak brain chemistry in order to get the mind to perform better. But the brain is one thing, it's the physical organ, and the mind is something completely different. It's non-physical. And as long as you're tweaking brain chemistry and you're not cleaning up the mind, then you're not going to be able to get a full solution. So someone who has ADHD, they can't concentrate. They have difficulties concentrating. They have challenges being focused. That's just because the mind is not well trained. If you train the mind, you'll actually be able to get to the point where you don't have those symptoms any longer, and you won't need those medications any longer. If you choose to take those medications for a period of time, that's a choice for you to make. But what you're going to notice is if you start training your mind with the teachings of the Buddha, 3 months, 6 months, a year, you're going to notice in a relatively short period of time that your concentration is going to significantly improve. The stability of your mind is going to significantly improve. And you're going to get to a point where you're most likely going to decrease and maybe even eliminate your medications, because you won't need them any longer, because your mind will have been trained and developed to have focus and concentration and clarity. But you need to be able to see that truth for yourself, because I was diagnosed with a lot of these things too. And I used to take medication, but I was able to eliminate all of that through training of the mind. So if you read chapter 22 in the first book, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about there and help you to be able to see how this is done. But of course, you're going to need all the other chapters in order to be able to train your mind in this direction. You wouldn't be able to just read chapter 22 and get a complete fix here. But if you gradually train your mind this way, it's not just me, but many of the students that have learned with me have also experienced significant improvements too. Even things as significant as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, personality disorders, ADHD, ADD, all these things. These are just misunderstandings that the Western world is having, thinking that is biological, when in reality it's just a lack of training of the mind. Here in Asia, they understand this. That's why they don't have a huge mental health epidemic in Asia, because they understand the training of the mind. Where in Western world, where they don't understand the mind as well, you're seeing all kinds of issues with these kinds of things. So I'm not familiar with that medication, but if you'd like to look at it, you can send me a private message and I can look at it for you. But you can get to a point where you're not experiencing those symptoms of ADHD anymore, because you've transformed your mind and you've trained it, and now it's performing optimally. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. You guys don't have any questions here either, right? Okay. So now it's basically 1 o'clock. So we're going to take a break here for lunch. And then when we come back, if you guys would like to come back at 2 o'clock, I'll teach you guys walking meditation. Or if you'd like to learn it before we leave and then just have a shortened day, we can do it that way as well. Whatever you guys would like to do, I'm fine either way. I see you shaking your head. Alicia, is that what you'd like to do? Learn walking meditation? Okay, so how about we take like a 10-minute break, just so I can switch over the live streaming stuff, and then we'll do walking meditation. Okay? All right. So for those of you guys online, I'm going to shut this off for about 10 minutes or so. Then I'm going to restart it. I'm going to teach walking meditation. Okay. So thank you guys for your questions.